Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Mamas in Miami, where together we're navigating parenthood with fierce love and unwavering solidarity. Happy Friday, everybody. Yesterday was 4th of July, and I hope everybody's enjoying time with their families and maybe hopefully has the day off today to enjoy and celebrate our nation's independence. Today, I've invited my old friend Ivonne Barroso to join us and talk to us about her son's miracle survival story. His name is Matteo, and he was born with a rare abdominal wall defect called an omphalocele. It affects, according to the CDC, 1 in every 4,200 live births here in the United States. I don't want to keep speaking about it without inviting her to join us because she is the one that knows all the information. And I'm just here to hear her story and share it with you all. So bear with me. I just saw she joined our chat. I'm going to invite her in and we're going to get started. You're forewarned. We may go over the 30-minute allotted time that we always like to give our time. There was just so much information about this, and I want to make sure we don't leave any stone unturned. So here we go. Yvonne will be joining us very shortly. And once again, she will be telling us a story about her survival miracle son, Matteo, who was born with an abdominal wall defect. It's a rare abdominal defect. Welcome to Mamas in Miami, and thank you so much for educating us on Mateo's story.
Thank you for having me.
Been so long. So first of all, go ahead and introduce yourself. I mean, you and I go way.
Yes. I'm Yvonne Barroso. I am a mother of three beautiful kids, Matteo being one of them, and I'm an attorney too. Um, but just love being a mom and happy to share his story.
Well, very, very. I'm excited that you're going to be sharing this with us because, it's so. I reached out to people. I contact who was going through this uh, same situation, well, similar situation to you, and I was the first person I thought of. I'm like, Yvonne will know exactly how to coach this mama through this process. Ever since you shared your story with Mateo, I feel like I hear about it more and more.
Yes, I feel like it's becoming more common. And I actually had somebody just reach out to me recently with the same issue, and I talked to them for a while about it. And even a couple years ago, somebody reached out from Argentina, and I spoke to them about it. So, it is something that is becoming. I guess I'm encountering more of it, and there's a group that was formed probably like within the last 3 years that seems to be very active and making people more aware of it and sharing stories and fundraising and doing all types of programs to help people that are going through the same issue.
So let's break this down for everybody who's hearing about this for the very first time. Explain it as simply as you can what it is.
Um, well, it's an abdominal wall defect, from when the child when in utero, the fetus at about 10 to 12 weeks, their abdominal wall closes, and sometimes it just doesn't close fully, and you have some abdominal organs that are essentially, in a little sac outside their body. And Mateo ended up with what's called a giant omphalocele because sometimes it could just be very small and it could just involve like intestine. He ended up with more than just intestine. He ended up with liver, part spleen, part intestine, and part stomach. So when he was born with the little sac that was transparent and you could, see some of his organs. And that was what we, encountered. And what is scary about the diagnosis typically is that when you find out about it, it is associated to chromosomal abnormalities. So trisomy 18, I think it's 13, and there's a couple more chromosomal abnormalities that could form. So we had to go through all the testing to make sure that it's what they called an isolated omphalocele, which we did believe it was. Then when he was born, we realized that he also had a spinal cord defect. So he had, well, spine, not spinal cord, spine defect, and he had severe scoliosis as well, which made it more complicated.
Right. Wow, that's a lot to swallow in 5 minutes. Let's start at the very beginning, Yvonne. When you found out you were pregnant with Matteo, you already had another one at home.
Yes. Yes. We actually had two. We had two girls at home.
And their ages were?
At the time, their ages were 2.5 and 4. No, 2.5 and 6.
So you had your hands full. At
Yes. We had our hands full, yes.
You find out you're pregnant, and at what week and what doctor's appointment did you find out that something was wrong?
We found out we were pregnant, very excited, obviously. Um, and we actually found out really early on. We found out at about 12 weeks. And when we found out, it wasn't a for sure diagnosis because you never know when you conceive. So they try to predict what week you're in. So they told us at the first ultrasound, but they did discover it at about 12. I think it was anywhere between 10 and 12 weeks. And they told us, let's come back in 2 weeks to make sure that this is the diagnosis. But the perinatologist really she realized it in the ultrasound. Um, and I kind of had the feeling at that point, you know, I even though we were coming back in 2 weeks to confirm the diagnosis, I felt like I kind of knew. Um, and it was hard. It was very, very difficult. But the way I function is I went into research mode. So we started finding out everything that we possibly could about what was happening, what was going on, what was the best, what was going to be the best treatment our best options. And we started interviewing medical providers all across the United States. Um, and so we were trying to just kind of get our hands around it and figure out what was the best course of action.
So by the time we walked into that following 2-week follow-up, you already had your research in hand and you were preparing to move forward.
We not all of it. I mean, it obviously took us a while because first it's researching, what it is exactly. Then it was initially when we were researching all like families that had encountered the same issue, it wasn't positive and um it wasn't always a positive. At the beginning it was pretty grim, and I think little by little we started getting better information. Mateo's current gastroenterologist had found out through a friend, and she put us in contact with two families that their kids had survived in Miami. So we started talking to them. Their Mateo's paternal grandmother was very good at researching, so she found us this great group called Mothers of Omphalocele. And that helped tremendously because once we started hearing, we got accepted, it's a closed group. And once we started hearing about, that there were kids that survived, or there were kids that were doing well, we started having more hope and more positivity. Um, but it was hard. It was really hard to find that information and find the positive information. And we obviously had to undergo a lot of testing, which we did. Um, and I feel like there was people that were put in our path, medical providers. I had to start seeing a pediatric cardiologist to make sure that he was okay and that his heart was okay in utero. And she was instrumental in putting us in touch with CHOP and the surgeon that we used at CHOP at Children's Hospital Philadelphia.
Right. And we'll get to that shortly. What is, if you happen to know off the top of your head, the statistic for survival rate with what Matteo had?
I think with a small omphalocele, it's I was reading recently, I don't think it was the statistics that we encountered obviously 10 years ago. Um, but I think now they say with a small omphalocele, it's about 90 with a larger one because they're not defined by size, they're defined by the organs that protrude, that are not in currently inside the body that so I think that's about a 70% chance. But for us, I think that's when it's an isolated omphalocele, when you're not dealing with other birth defects. We were expecting him to be in that 70%, but then when he was born, he did have another significant birth defect that probably was more complicated than this one.
Right. At any point, did your doctor, and feel free not to answer if you don't feel comfortable, but at any point, did the doctor consider speaking to you about terminating the pregnancy, or were they confident it was something that Mateo would overcome in the future?
Um, Miami did not have a lot of experience, the surgeons in Miami. So we obviously the first surgeons we interviewed were the surgeons in Miami. And they did not have that much experience with it. So there was one that, you know, suggested it was going to be a very, very difficult road and that we should consider that. Nobody tells you to do it, but I think, he definitely, one surgeon we interviewed definitely said, you should be a consideration. That was about the only medical provider that suggested that.
Those 9 months carrying Mateo must have been so difficult for you. Um,
It was. It was, but, it was really hard at the beginning. I think that, talking to those 2 families was incredible because it really did give us a lot of hope. And then, when we finally went to Children of Philadelphia's hospital, when we finally went to CHOP, I'm just gonna call it CHOP because it's easier. When we finally went to CHOP, um they are very matter of fact. They don't sugarcoat it. They give you the good, the bad, the ugly. Um, but one of the good news we did get there because they had um a a more detailed ultrasound. They have an MRI that I think they've developed it and it actually looks at lung capacity and measures their lungs in utero, which, we had not done that in Miami. And we actually got good news. They really thought that his lung capacity was good, that his lungs were measuring because these children tend to have very small lungs because their bodies are very narrow. So they really, it looked good. It looked really, really good. And then when he was born, it was a different story.
so at what week did you deliver Mateo?
38 weeks,
And you went
normal.
or naturally?
No, we did C-section. I could not do it. I had to do a C-section with him because there's a chance of the sac erupting. And so they couldn't take that risk. I think there are people that when they have a small fallacy, they're given that option, but we knew that he had a giant fallacy.
Was this your first C-section?
It was my first C-section.
Okay, so walk us through delivery day.
Well, delivery day was a little crazy because I had a scheduled C-section and I went into labor and I was not great about knowing that I was going into labor. So and with my first one, I went into labor and I was not very aware of it. And then The same thing happened with Matteo, but I had to be at the hospital really early in the morning, even though my C-section was going to take place a lot later. When I got there, I was going into labor, so they had to kind of put me in the front of the line. Um, so it was it was great because obviously he was born. But it was a little tough because we really were expecting from everything that we knew that we really thought he was going to be breathing on his own. And then I think he was only able to breathe on his own for about 6 seconds and then he had to be intubated. So so that was really hard. That was very, very, very hard. Um, and then I couldn't see him right away. Family got to see him right away. I didn't get to see him right away. I saw him for a little bit and then they took him to the NICU. Um, and then I got wheeled up a little bit after. And it was hard. It was really, really hard to see because obviously he was intubated. There was a lot going on. So it was hard. Um, but I was so happy he was alive. So, so happy. So it was it was rough, but it was also, you know, the best moment of your life, you're having your child. And he was our first boy. So, it was we were really, really looking forward to having a boy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Imagine. So how long was this starts your journey? I mean, the moment he's born, I think you must feel like, okay, the clock's ticking.
Yeah. And the I I think that both of us were extremely, extremely positive people. So, we were just trying to figure out how can we be the most positive that we can. And I know it was hard for our families. For the birth, it was in Philadelphia. So his parents were,
Already into the
yeah, my parents were there. His parents were there. Um, it was, um, I think it was happy, but it was something we had never encountered. But we, from the very beginning, were very positive. We said we're going to be very positive. And there was already a family with a daughter who had had an omphalocele, giant omphalocele, in the hospital in the NICU. And I think she was about 8 months. And they had it really hard too. But the mom was so positive and so amazing. And she was thriving and doing well. Um, she was on a ventilator, but she was, I mean, doing fantastic. And I remember the mom telling us the best thing you could do is be positive, positive, positive. So from there on out, we're decorating the room. We had playlists. We had the girls when they were there dancing and positive, positive, positive. And to me, I think that really made a difference in helping him heal and
absolutely you
helping him survive. I really do.
because I always knew you were a strong person. And God really only gives you as much as you can handle.
I agreed.
Obviously, I'm not gonna spoil the end, but I mean, Mateo is a thriving, healthy little boy today, and it's all because of all the love and positive energy and prayers that you gave him from day one.
Yeah, and it really it's funny because I think you had said this to me before and it really does take a village and we had our village and our village was amazing and definitely played an enormous role in his survival because it was it really did take like both of our families, our friends, we had, you know, family that came up, we had friends that came up, we had everybody in every church across Miami praying for him. It was really, it takes a village, like it really does. And even after we came back to Miami, therapy, nurses, everybody really, took to him and really helped him be where he is today.
Well, I don't think I've ever told you this, but apart from, how we met and how we're connected, you and I have one really good friend in common, and that's our biggest friend.
And she was there. She went up.
Uh, and I was probably aware of your situation before you even knew I was.
Yeah.
And now she and I started praying immediately.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it all made a difference. It really did. It made a huge, huge difference. Magda was wonderful. She came up and she cheered me up and she got to meet him and she got to carry him. She got to eat a lot of Cuban food because my parents make everybody Cuban food when they would come up. So it was really wonderful. We had a wonderful support system. We really did.
And, the testimony is that he's thriving and doing wonderfully today.
Yes, but he is doing fantastic.
We have so much to talk about from today, so let's wipe our tears and keep going. Um, w- the first thing you do is he's born C-section. They immediately take him to the NICU. You said that they intubated him because you were not expecting him not to be breathing after 6 seconds. How soon? Explain to everybody how this works because it's not a surgery that you could do immediately because it's a tiny body and then grow.
Right. So, we had a very complicated journey. He was intubated for about 3.5 months. Then he was finally extubated, and at about 5 months, he was just not thriving, not gaining a lot of weight. He was using all his energy to breathe. So they had told us, um, that, they had recommended getting a tracheostomy. So the first surgery he ever got was a tracheostomy tube. And and that was really hard because I feel like if you're in the medical field, you realize that that's probably a a really good thing. It's gonna make you independent. It's a really but both of us were not in the medical fields and it was like a huge decision. But looking back now in retrospect, it was one of the best ones we ever made because after that, he really, really did start getting better and thriving, and he started growing and getting it really helped him, and it helped him with the future surgeries to come.
So that's
Um,
number one.
that was surgery number 1, and the difficult part with him, he had a giant omphalocele, so off the back, they don't do surgery. They do what's called a paint and wait, and paint and wait is kind of the same medication that they would give a burn victim. They put that medication in on the omphalocele every day to create skin, and they teach you how to do it right away. So I learned how to do it right away. I was doing it with the nurses every day, and then I was doing it on my own. And so for a long period of time, the first part is create skin. And then when you create skin, as they start growing little by little, you start doing um, a dressing that you're pushing it in. But you had to wait. We waited about, I think he got his closure surgery when he was about 2.5. So he waited about 2.5 years.
Practically living in the hospital in Philadelphia.
Yeah, we were in the hospital for about 13, probably not close to 13 months because he came home, I think, a little shy of 13 months.
Yvonne, what was it like having two other children at home at half?
Well, Valentina was with me and she was in school. My other daughter was from his previous marriage, so she was flying back and forth every other weekend with their dad. And so it was hard. It was hard for the family to be apart. It was hard. Um, but at the beginning, my other daughter wasn't in school, and I had to put her in school because I really was very, very positive. So I was like, oh, we'll be in Philadelphia for 3 months. And 3 months turned into 13 months. So, she had to go to school there and they were absolutely fantastic. I found a preschool for her. The preschool was amazing. The people were amazing. Everybody that was I feel like it was God's plan. Everybody that he put in our path was pretty amazing and made it a little easier for us. So we ended up getting into a routine where Valentina was going to school. My dad and I would take her to school in the morning, and then my mom and I would go to the hospital as soon as we dropped her off. And the hospital Children's Hospital Philadelphia is just an amazing place. It's not only one of the best hospitals in the United States, but because of what they do and who they treat, but also how they train parents to take care of their kids. So from the very beginning, they're training you on how to take your kid home and how to care for him. So both Mateo's dad and I both had to learn to take care of him, and we had to learn how to change his trach. I learned everything there was to know about his ventilator settings, how to take it apart, how to put it together, how to, when he's on the bedside, you have to have him attached a certain way, but then you could take it apart to take him, for a walk in the stroller. So we both learned to do that, and they test you, they take you through everything. So really the 13 months were hard, but it taught us how to care for him and how, to take him home so he can have a semi-normal life.
In the 13 months that you were there at Philadelphia Hospital, how many surgeries or procedures did he go through?
He went through it ended up being 6 surgeries in total. The first one was a tracheostomy tube. The second one is for the first couple of months, he wasn't stable enough to get an MRI. When he was stable enough to get an MRI, um, he they figured out that he had severe scoliosis and what they call thoracic insufficiency, which is his body is like very, very narrow. And then in addition to having severe scoliosis, he had like a C curve, but his spine was a little twisted. So his ribs were pushing down on his lungs and weren't going to let his lungs grow. So at about 8 months, they had to put in rods in his back, which were called Vector rods. They were invented by his orthopedic surgeon at Children's Hospital Philadelphia. And that was rough because they weren't made for an 8-month-old, so his incisions kept opening up. Um, the rods got infected at one point, and so we had additional surgeries that were caused by all of these issues that he started having because it was really hard for such a tiny little baby to have, these rods, but it was the only thing they could do to give him, for him to survive, because at that point they were saying they weren't without the rods, there wasn't a really good chance of survival.
At that point, they were saying that.
Yeah, I mean, they were saying it before that because at the beginning when they saw we really didn't know. We really, really prepared for the omphalocele. We had no idea about the scoliosis, and it kind of the omphalocele took a back seat to the scoliosis. The scoliosis became the real big issue that was preventing him from being able to breathe on his own and what was really keeping him on the ventilator and keeping his lungs from growing. So they that was really what had to be addressed first. And the only way they could address that is putting these rods in, but he was so tiny that it was really, it became challenging for him at that point.
And by surgery number 6, um, I'm assuming that you had that under control, the rods in the back?
Yeah, by surgery number 6, it was everything was he had become stable enough where he was gonna be able to be transferred to Miami, and then that became a real big issue because on top of having all these issues in the hospital, you're fighting insurance companies, you're dealing with all these insurance issues and dealing with
Were you working at that time? Or you
I was not working, I was on maternity leave, and my old job, which was wonderful, they would give us I think it was, like, 4 months of maternity leave, and then I extended it. They would always let you extend it, um, so I got to extend it for about 6 months, but then it became evident that I wasn't gonna be able to go back to work, and I did have to stop working for probably about 2.5 years. And that was hard because I really identified as an attorney, and that was a whole other issue, dealing with this is something that I really loved, I really identified with, but obviously there was like hands down, there was no choice,
tribal no.
Yeah, and I didn't mind at that point, but it was hard. It was hard to let go, and it was like a very um it was that point in my career where you're making partner or not making partner. So that was really,
Yeah,
really hard, but we knew what
and
we had to do.
it's survival mode. More fun.
Yeah.
By the time you had surgery number 6 and he's being discharged from the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, what is his medical status?
He still had an omphalocele, so we would be doing a dressing every day. He had a tracheostomy tube and he was on a ventilator.
And and you brought him home on
We
shou
air ambulance. We had air ambulance that was initially was not being covered, but then we fought both his father and I, and him on one end, me on the other, and he was able to come home in air ambulance.
what was it like to bring him home to Miami for the
Oh,
first time?
it was amazing. It was so, so amazing. It was overwhelming too because you have to set up your house with all types of medical equipment. So it was really overwhelming, but it was also incredible, incredible, incredible. But then he had to be at Nicholas Children's Hospital for about 2 weeks, and and then he got to go home, but was right back there 2 weeks later because he was sick. And it's hard because when they're that little and on ventilators, they get sick pretty positive, you know.
Old?
The first time he got sick after being discharged from Nicholas Children's Hospital, it was actually a stomach virus. And it was one of those stomach viruses that people commonly get on cruise ships, so we had no idea, we didn't it's like an it was exactly, norovirus, that's what it was. And we didn't know if it was something that maybe one of the nurses brought, I mean, obviously not on purpose, but it's just something that happened, so we were back in the hospital, and I think he was back in the hospital for about 2 weeks, and then he was home.
By those 13 well, after by the time he was 1.5, 2, would you say that you felt like he's gonna survive this, he's gonna be okay? At what age and what point did you finally feel like you could breathe a little bit and say, "We're on the road, we're on the upward path"?
I think at the beginning, I mean, I think that we were always very, very, very positive. I think and I think one of the things I will say is I never thought about, is he because you're not really thinking long term at any point. I feel like for the first couple of years it's a day by day and it's day by day. And they tell you the NICU is a roller coaster, and it really is. Like, it is you have major highs, major lows, and then but you learn to take it day by day, because that's the only way you could really assess anything. But the one thing about Matteo, which was incredible from the day he was born, is he was going through horrible times, but always laughing, always smiling. So I always felt like that was his way of telling me, like, even when he didn't talk, that everything's okay and everything's gonna be okay. So that was the most, I think, remarkable thing about him, that no matter what, how bad, anything was, how bad in pain he was always laughing. Every picture that we have of him in the hospital is him laughing, smiling. I always, and it was just incredible, incredible. And
That because I would see all his progress pictures and he always had this how the Hispanics say las carcajadas.
it was always like,
Giggle and the pic through the picture.
yeah, and I think it was also, we would always be happy, 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 and the girls were always, on top of him, making him laugh, smiling, they were, and the girls were both really, really great because, it was like day in, day out in a hospital for two little girls, and it was really hard, and I think that today, they are so resilient and strong and remarkable because of it, and they're such good sisters, like, such good sisters.
Amazing. No. In total, how many procedures has Matteo had throughout his lifetime?
Now, to date, 17.
And at what point was his omphalocele completely corrected?
His omphalocele was he had closure surgery about I think he was 2.5. It was yeah, he was about 2.5 when he had closure surgery.
What was that like for you that day?
The crazy part is, the back became such a big thing that the omphalocele almost became like not like it took a back seat, like it really did. The hardest thing was the back because the back he was for the vector rods, he was getting surgery every 4 to 6 months to expand it. So, and at the beginning, we were flying back to Philadelphia for those surgeries. And then there came a point where we did find a surgeon in Miami, and we switched to the surgeon in Miami, and we did it. Um, we said, okay, we're gonna do the expansions in Miami, and then if he has to have a big surgery, we'll go back to Philadelphia. And right when that happened, our orthopedic surgeon in Philadelphia died. So that was like, oh my goodness. And it was very, very sad and very hard. But luckily, we had already found a surgeon here who has become his surgeon, and he's just as wonderful and just as amazing. And then in 2019, we put in these rods that are called magic rods, and they've been life changing because what he had to do a surgery for, now he does 5 minutes in an office, and it's amazing, amazing. Like, technology is amazing, medical innovations are amazing, and so it's really changed our lives. So, for the good, much, like, much, much
I
better.
see that our friend that we have in common just I invited her in, but I think she's in a situation right now where she can't show face. But I just wanted her to give testimony of what a strong person you
Oh, that's so nice.
up strength you had during this whole process.
I think we all did. I think everybody held each other up. Everybody was really, really strong, including our kids. And I think it all of it played a part in him doing as well as he is doing nowadays.
Tell us about Mateo today.
Ugh, best personality ever. He is quite the character. He's doing great. He has pretty much overcome a lot of it, a lot of, you know, what he went through. He's overcome a lot of it. Believe it or not, the one of the most difficult things, and everybody's going to be like, this is crazy. Feeding became one of the most difficult obstacles because we don't realize how innate it is for a child to learn to eat and drink milk and feed when they're So we had a very difficult time with feeding, and nowadays he eats everything, he tries everything, he eats like crazy. So we are loving life.
And for everybody wondering about his physicality today, would you ever know that he had an omphalocele when he was born today?
And honestly, one of the things that I admire most about him is, and one of the things I worried most was when he got to school, because when he first started school, he still had his NG tube. And I thought he was gonna be very self-conscious, and even nowadays, I thought he was gonna be self-conscious because he doesn't have a belly button, and, because of his yeah, he doesn't have a belly button because of his closure surgery, and he didn't have, like, an abdominal wall, so, um, he lifts his shirt, he doesn't care, he knows, and it doesn't bother him, and he's very, very self-confident, like, which is obviously something a parent worries about, like, how's he gonna deal with all of this? And he's very self-confident. He is got a crazy personality, the best sense of humor, um, and he's just a remarkable kid, like, he really is. And never it despite that he didn't meet many milestones when he was young, he has never fallen behind in school. He is right where he needs to be. He's gonna be tested for gifted. He is just amazing. Like, he's amazing, amazing. So,
I uh, share with everybody that after Matteo, you did have another child.
I did. Mr. Massimo. Yes, I did.
No,
I had an
we're pregnant with Massimo.
He was about, oh, I think they're like 22 months apart.
Oh my God. Ha.
So right when I was coming home from Philadelphia, I found out I was pregnant. And but they're like they're best friends. It was
What does he?
of they're the best friends. And
Will be long-term challenges or any no.
so far so good. I mean, at some point he'll need to replace his rods. And I think as he grows, we'll figure out, because my understanding is that they could keep the rods for the rest of their life when they turn 18, or they can have spinal fusion. And then sometimes you keep the rods in, sometimes you don't. So I think eventually we'll have to make those kind of decisions. But no, he's doing well. I thought he would have challenges with contact sports, or been cleared for contact sports, skiing, for everything. He's doing great.
Well, the day he turns 18, he could call his Thea Christie and we'll talk spinal. He's scared of, and I only wish I'd done it sooner because there's no fear in it, which he's got nothing to fear. He's been through so much worse.
Yeah.
But
And his back is, like, amazing.
it-
It's very, very straight. Those rods are just absolutely amazing. So he's doing amazing, amazing.
oh, here she is right now, Maggie 284. Sorry, ladies, I'm driving, so definitely don't answer. I forgive the parents of both Yvonne and Matteo, a truly special family, and I couldn't agree more.
Oh, thank you.
Is there any support groups or resources for families with babies who have an omphalocele that you can recommend today?
Yeah. I think I had sent you the link. There's a new group that, I mean, they're relatively new, but it's called O Warriors, and they fundraise, they have programs to help families that are in the hospital and need financial assistance. They also have a grant program, I believe, for a lot of the Omphalocele kids have special car seats, and they're very expensive car seats to protect, because many of them don't get closure surgery till they're older. So they have to be in a special car seat, and that car seat is very expensive. So I think they have a grant program for the car seats where they give them out. So I know that they have been doing some really, really great stuff. I need to get more involved with them. They have from everything I've read, I get their newsletter and they're doing some really, really great stuff. And then I know that there's some groups that help NICU parents in general, like parents that are having a difficult time and financially, and their kids are long term in the NICU. There is also, when we were in Philadelphia, we were lucky that we didn't have to use it, but Ronald McDonald House is a lot of the families that are at CHOP, and CHOP is a nonprofit and they do a lot of charitable work. So a lot of the families that we met that were there, some were there because they were CHOP was really, doing everything without charging them, and a lot of the families stay at the Ronald McDonald House, which is relatively close to CHOP. So there's yeah.
One last question for you. What do you wish you had known at the beginning of this journey?
What do I wish I would have known? Um, I think that, I mean, I guess you always feel like you should have known more, or you should have um eh, taken things in stride. And I don't think you could ever prepare for it, but I think that we did the best we could to prepare for it. And I think we did, we had the best attitude. I think that what I've learned from it is I don't stress the small stuff anymore. I don't, I feel like I can overcome a lot. I feel like I always tell my kids, be happy with, don't focus on what you don't have, focus on what you do. And I think that's become very important because you just realized what matters. And you really, really do realize what matters. And you realize that don't sweat the small stuff, There's like bigger things that happen and you got to be grateful. Gratitude is very important.
I think that's a beautiful way to close today's tribal meeting. We always extinguish fire when we're together at Mamas and Miami. And Yvonne, I cannot thank you and for sharing.
Ooh, for letting me share our story.
You're always welcome here. You'll always have a seat at our table. God, God bless you and your beautiful family. We're just so honored that you chose us to share your story with. And I hope that this, if it helps just one more family, then we've done our job here today.
Exactly. Thank you for having me, and enjoy your vacation.
We will be leaving in a couple hours. I've just got things to check off my list. As you know, I write my list and I send the toiletry bags. That's going to happen now. But you enjoy your 4th of July weekend with your family.
Thank you.
And we touch
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye bye.
next week. Bye.